Dear students, today we have just to discuss an introductory part to the novel named David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. We had already had a discussion on its summary and its plot, and come to know that this novel is written very enthusiastically and very realistically by Charles Dickens. This is the novel which deals with the psychological effect on the personality development on a particular character, say David Copperfield in this novel. As you know that we have just to go through so many ups and downs in our life since we are born. We cannot say that there is a smooth running on the road of life, and it is actually an easygoing process for a person to live successfully here. We know from our personal experience that to live successfully professionally is an uphill task, and especially when a child had lost his father before the birth, we can simply imagine how difficult it would have been for the child to concentrate on his development. Now, we are also going to take into account so many relevant aspects of the society to which Charles Dickens belongs. Because when a writer or a novelist tries to compose a novel or say a story, he has so many things in his mind to reveal, either directly or indirectly. He lights on different aspects of social realities, and then he is just going to record the social, cultural, political, and economic realities on the one hand, and the development of individuality on the other. Now, we should know that this is the eighth novel of Charles Dickens, and it has several full titles, including the personal history, adventures, experience and observation of David Copperfield in the younger of Blunderstone, Rockery, and so on. So these titles explain that there is a personal history of the main character named David Copperfield. It also tells us that to travel on the path of life is an adventurous job. It is just like trekking, it is just like mountaineering, it is just like going on safari and so on. But we get habituated to live, so we do not feel it's a trauma or it's a stroke that during our journey we receive, and very adventurously we deal with all the situations which are just coming in our way of life. And naturally, we find that during our life we observe so many things, we observe so many phenomena, and accordingly we just gather our experience. And so is done by David Copperfield, the main character in this novel, that he has developed himself and he has a story to talk about. That is the personal history of his life. And in this story, he mentions lots of adventurous situations that he overcomes. And in course of the journey of life, he gathers experiences, observes the situation, and by and by he develops himself into a successful professionalist. Now, we should also notice that this particular novel first published as a serial in 1849 and 50, but it came out as a book in 1850. Or when we read this book, we find that it has been written in the first person, that it is very much the personal experience of the character that he is sharing with us. And we find that it is the description of David's life when he is born till his middle age, when he is professionally successful. And we also know that there are several situations of adventures, and there are numerous friends and enemies in David's life too. So all these things have been discussed, and we equally find that it is almost the same about our lives too. You also find the same kind of friends, the same kind of enemies, and accordingly we confront friends and enemies equally and gather our experience, develop ourselves, and we too have our personal history to tell someone. So everybody here has a personal history. Everybody here has just a kind of adventurous journey, or everybody has his personal experience of life, which has helped a lot to develop as a personality. So we find that in this novel there is David's story, David's journey of change and growth from infancy to maturity. And this journey is full of ups and downs. This journey is full of events and odds. And it is what life is. Charles Dickens tries to say through this story that it is what our life is. We cannot simply say that there is a constant pace of life, and since our birth to death, we have to move on that constant road with constant speed. Rather, you can say that there is a process of acceleration, and the speed of life, pace of life has not been the same all through our life. So, people come and people go of our lives. We find that during our journey of life, we find lots of friends, we find lots of enemies, and we deal with all these people one by one or collectively. And we find there are some people who always remain very important in our lives, but there are some who come and who go, and there are some who are creating lots of problems, there are some who are supporting us a lot, and so on. So he David Copperfield goes through the stages of his development. In psychology too, we find that there are different stages of development of personality of a particular human being. We cannot say that there is always the same process to development of personality to all human beings. It depends on individual circumstance in which a child is born and lots of other factors. So whatever is social, familial, economical circumstances, which have a very great role to play in the shaping of personality. And so is the story of Charles Dickens, David Copperfield also, because we can say it is the story of Charles Dickens also, uh, because it is the autobiographical to some extent that we can discuss later on. So this is a masterpiece. This is the triumph of the art of Dickens. It is the art of living that we can learn from the story of this novel. We can say that we live as David Copperfield has been living here, from different traumas to different shocking situations and so on. So, this novel is the story of youth and his maturity. And we can say that Charles Dickens has shared lots of his personal experience of his life. So it is also described as autobiographical novel. So this novel does not have any outline. So it is without an outline. And just there are some aspects of the story which are fixed from the start. Uh, they hardly are changed. But there are some others, like the profession of David Copperfield as a writer and the sad death of Dora, have not been fixed. Sometimes it happens when the writer is trying to write, he just sketches an outline of his story, and it has been seen that the outline of the story that he has sketched at the very much outset of the story writing has been not the same. There are some incidents which remain the same, but there are some incidents which are changed. So, and even after writing the novel, we can find that there are so many writers who think that there would have been different endings of the story. There would have been different way and plots of the story that he has just written. So it is almost a continuous process. Even if the writing is over, the writer thinks it differently when he is asked after the writing of a particular work about the process that he has gone through and the plots that he has woven. He says that no, it has not been the way that he has started and he has finished. He wanted to do something in a different manner too. So this is what is about this novel too. Now we find that here this is the novel about the Victorian 18th century England, and this is the loose and disjointed model of personal history. We can say that somewhere we find that the story is not well knit. David Copperfield is carefully structured. In 18th century, we find that there have been so many novels which have some loose and disjoint models. But when we talk about the structure of David Copperfield, we can say that it has a carefully structured and unified plots. So it is not going to follow the then prevalent pattern of the novel writing. So we can find that the beginning is bleak painting of the conditions of childhood. Now, sometimes you find that the story writer is talking about notoriously parking of the troublesome children in infamous boarding schools. You can find that this kind of beginning is made in other novels also by other authors and writers, because it was what the pattern was of the 18th century Victorian story writing. Now, later his strive of slow social and intimate development of a young man ending up becoming a writer has also been almost the model of story writing into that such society. So the main theme here too you find is the growth and change to maturity. Actually, whatever changes comes in our life, it is all for growth and for maturity of our personality. Most often we are sorry when we see lots of just uh, striving, lots of conflicting situation in our life. When you see lots of strifes in our life, we are frustrated to see all these kind of things, and we try to avoid all these things, and we hope that these strikes must not come, but it does not happen whether we like or we don't, but they come, and they have their effects also, and they make us mentally more prepared, mentally just more mature. So just this is what the aspects of Victorian era life is that we find just mentioned in the novel. And we can see that there are so many other issues prevalent in the Victorian era which have been discussed in other novels too and in these novels too, including prostitutes, the attitude of middle class society to them, a status of women in marriage, and rigid class structure. These things have been almost uh, permanent issues in the story and novels of Victorian era. And in David Copperfield, also Charles Dickens has just lighted on these aspects of reality of Victorian life in his novel. So we can say that it is that is Copperfield is Dickens' darling for being the most autobiographical. It has so many painful episodes of his life, which appear directly or indirectly. So we cannot say that it is pure autobiographical, but it is the presentation of truth and invention. And there are some autobiographical contents as a child just spent at Warren factory. It has happened to Charles Dickens also. So his first love to Maria Badnell, his career as a journalist and writer, these are the important events that we find had taken place in the life of Charles Dickens also. And these things have been just very much captured in this particular novel. So we can say that to some extent this is autobiographical in composition. So the narrative is linear in appearance. We can say that there is no complex plot that it starts in a traditional first person form, and there is the linear endeavor and development of the story. However, we can say that it talks about the psychological and moral growth of the protagonist from youth to adulthood. The intention and concern of the story is more important than the way that he has told the story. He has been presenting lots of situations, and these situations are responsible for psychological and moral growth of the protagonist. So we can say that in another novel of Dickens, there are changes in character, and the changes in character is extremely important. So Dickens' desire for reform of the plight of so-called fallen man, it is what his intention is. That this is the issue of the 18th century, and he tries to find a way out for the fallen women, prostitutes. And we can also say that the attitude of middle class society to these women, the status of women in marriage, the rigid class structure, the prison system, educational standards, these are the burning issues of Victorian society. And when Charles Dickens includes all these things in his novel, his intention is to reform, because he is a literary personality who is not writing only for entertainment. He is raising the issue prevalent in his society, and he has the intention to reform for the better life of the people and women. So we can say this is what the introduction of this novel is, and we'll be glad to just enter the novel with these kind of introductory remarks in our mind. Thank you.